Okay, so I'm very pleased to introduce our speakers today, Di, Lou, and Will Stovall in conversation with Mary Early about HEMPHILL's current exhibition, What's Going Around, Lou Stovall and the Community Poster, 1967 to 1976. Lou Stovall was born in Athens, Georgia in 1937 and grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts. He studied at the Rhode Island School of Design and at Howard University. Since 1962, he has lived and worked in Washington, D.C. His drawings and silkscreen prints have earned him grants from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Stern Family Fund. Stovall's own prints and drawings are part of a numerous public and private collections throughout the world. Though his craft is that of a printmaker, Stovall's passion for art extends beyond a single medium. He gives the same care and attention to his archival framing and furniture construction as he does to his intricate prints and drawings. Stovall's studio, adjacent to his home in Cleveland Park, is the hub of his artistic energy. Under his direction, Workshop Inc., founded in 1968, has grown from a small but active studio primarily concerned with community posters into a professional training facility. Through Workshop, Stovall has made a unique effort to build unity among artists in Washington, D.C., and to encourage, by his own example, service to the community. Di Bagley Stovall, a native of Columbus, Georgia, has been a Washington, D.C. resident and participant in the artistic and cultural community since 1967. Her highly praised artwork has been exhibited nationally and internationally. Stovall's work with acrylic paint on paper, glass, and handcrafted jewelry, as well as her work on wooden cabinetry, displays a wide range of ideas and possibilities. She is a noted master of the miniature, creating representational and abstract images painted in absorbing detail. She states that this allows her to play color against pattern, to challenge the perceptions of light, shadow, and perspective. The wide range of artistic techniques she employs and the sense of narrative in her work invite you to take a closer look. In doing so, you'll find more than a little magic in her imaginative works. Will Stovall is an artist and painter who has also worked in the book medium. He holds a PhD from Yale University with a dissertation on the institutional imagination of philosopher Jürgen Habermas. He organizes the Lou Stovall Workshop in Washington, D.C. Mary Early is the director of HEMPHILL, a Washington, D.C. art gallery founded in 1993. With an expertise in exhibition planning, curatorial services, and art collection management. She has worked closely with artist estates and collections to develop long-range exhibition and collection management plans, and to place individual works and collections with museum institutions and private collections. She serves on the boards of Hamiltonian Artists and Washington Sculptors Group, and is a co-chair of the Bennington College Alumni Cooperative's DC chapter. She has particular interest in public art and community engagement, as well as the materials and processes of contemporary sculpture. Please join me in a warm and virtual welcome to today's program participants. Mary?
Thank you, Beverly and Nancy. And also thanks to the audience for joining us on this wonderful Wednesday morning. I want to thank the Washington Print Club for creating such an engaging talk series over the past year. I have enjoyed a handful of your talks, and I'm so happy we can share the current exhibition with your members and audience. I'm going to talk briefly, and then I'll show you a series of images of posters in the show and also installation photos. And then we will begin a conversation with a series of questions to Lou and Di and Will. And then we will have an opportunity for a few questions towards the end. HEMPHILL is pleased to present our very first exhibition of Lou Stovall's work. Lou has been a constant and influential presence in DC's art community since his arrival in Washington in the early 60s. As many of you know, he is a pioneer in the art of silkscreen printing, with the distinction of master printer, and has worked diligently throughout his decades in Washington to bring greater attention to printmaking and also to the use of art processes in the community towards education and social advancement. In the course of the gallery's history, we have had locations in Georgetown, Logan Circle, and now we are close to the Central Business District in Mount Vernon Triangle. When we began to plan our move to Mount Vernon Triangle in 2019, we knew that we wanted to introduce the gallery to the neighborhood by presenting a significant piece of Washington's art history, rather than focusing on contemporary art, which we would eventually do throughout our exhibition cycles. We wanted to bring something historic to this new audience. The posters produced by the workshop in the late 1960s and early 70s were just the thing. We felt that the posters would serve to educate a new audience about the impact of art, and also to help to introduce the gallery's work to an audience that may not have a history in Washington or may not have a history of attending art exhibitions in a gallery setting. The posters do many things, but one thing they do very importantly is directly illustrate how a workshop or an artist studio or a gallery space can become the organizing center of an art community. The workshop served as a destination and a nucleus for artistic activity. And the work that Lou did with the help of so many artists was not possible without many hands helping. There were artists to share ideas, Lou's expertise to help interpret them, and then the untold hours of production, and then the participation of many people in the events that all of these posters illustrated. Give me just a sec. I'm going to now share screen. That is always a little stumbling block when we're on Zoom. Hold on. Great. This is the first view of the exhibition in the space at Hemphill. And we have kind of a thematic arrangement of posters. They are not necessarily in chronological order. And I will go through details of a handful of individual prints, and then I definitely encourage you all to look deeper on our website, which features the exhibition and shows all of the individual prints and captions. There is a wealth of information hidden in the text of each print, and in almost every case, text is an essential design component of the print. This is a benefit concert poster for a jazz concert at Bohemian Caverns, organized by Stokely Carmichael in early 1968 to ease the impact of violence during the Martin Luther King riots. 1968 was a pivotal moment, not just for Washington, but for the world at large. And this poster is a very humble and quiet depiction of a family group, mother, father, child, and has so much meaning just beyond this pared down imagery. This next work is a poster commissioned, Lou Stovall was commissioned by Paul Reed, who was a Washington Color School artist who was also the director of graphics at the Peace Corps. Reed had collaborated with Lou on his own prints, and this highlights the Peace Corps and with minimal graphic elements, and then this ribbon of eloquent text evokes the idea of global reach and individual efforts towards peace. This poster, a collaboration by Lloyd Mcneill and Lou Stovall, both graduates of Howard University's MFA program, also 1968, announces a November 1968 university conference. This student conference was held following student sit-in protests earlier in the year, which pushed for changes in institutional policy and asking the administration to create courses in African American history and Black studies. This sit-in and future organizing events at Howard were part of a nationwide campus movement seeking changes in educational policy. The poster incorporates a very specific set of colors, green, black, and red, signifying the importance of Black unity in the struggle against racism and segregation. These colors were nationally recognized for use in the protest movement, and this is a great example of how visual elements, when used broadly, can come to signify a movement, almost a flag, if you will, for this very specific movement. Another view of the installation, and to your left you see a poster for the outdoor art show on P Street in DuPont Circle, which was held in conjunction with Jefferson Place Gallery. Jefferson Place Gallery was, from the late 50s to the early 70s, really the center of Washington's art scene, which also was incorporated around the Phillips collection, which was just a few blocks away. Jefferson Place presented contemporary and conceptual artists, which was not the norm at the time, giving voice to such experimental artists as light artist Rodney Krebs and experimental sculptor Ed McGowan. Second over from the left is a poster for Roberta Flack, who is a longtime favorite of Washington music lovers, a native Washingtonian, and whose concerts Lou designed posters for many, many times over. Here, the two posters in the center represent two of a group of posters designed to celebrate Arena Stage's 1968 to 69 season. And on the left, a production of a James Baldwin play, and on the right, a series of 3 plays presented at the Howard University Theater. As you can see, based on the needs of the project, size might be determined by the requests from Arena Stage, the composition designed in collaboration with another artist, and then always incorporating the necessary text information to communicate who, when, where, why. We now, of course, have so many digital tools at our advantage that advertising images or posters really don't contain very much text anymore. But in the 60s and 70s, text would be the most important part of any communication. And here we see there's a great effort to create graphic elements out of the text and to create very distinctive compositions. Close-up of the King Lear image. This poster was designed with Walter Hopps and Lou Stovall for the 32nd Corcoran Biennial at the Corcoran Gallery of Art, 1971. The Corcoran was a biennial exhibition held starting in 1907. It would bring nationally recognized artists to the Corcoran, where their works would be exhibited throughout the museum. It was a groundbreaking exhibition series, and by 1971, the Corcoran was already becoming known for exhibiting cutting-edge contemporary art. Walter Hopps became among the most influential curators of his time and had a particular flair for creating exhibitions. He was much beloved by the Corcoran family and also by Washington. And so this is a really wonderfully treasured image. I'm gonna quit screen sharing and go back to speaker view. I hope you all do the same. And I will start with a series of questions to Lou and Di to answer. First, I would love to hear you describe your first studio in Washington, D.C., which I know was on M Street in DuPont Circle.
I'm sorry, we had a little bit of technical issues there.
A a little flash of quietness. I'm on our first question. Would you please describe your first studio in Washington, which was on M Street and DuPont Circle?
Well, it was a magnificent studio funded by our great friends, Philip and Lenny Stern. It was an effort to put the community into the whole idea of making art for the community so that the community would feel that they had some ownership. All of the equipment was handmade by a group of volunteers and myself, and it was a joy to work with so many young people who came to this studio just to see and feel what it was like to build a studio, and it went on from there.
Thank you. This exhibition, along with the recent presentation at the Columbus Museum in your hometown of Columbus, Georgia, focus on posters created very much in the spirit of social activism and community and music events and political change. When making these works in the 60s and 70s, how did you balance the production of posters with the pursuit of your personal work, which was often much more environmentally abstract?
Well, my personal work essentially was to build a studio that would be dedicated to printmaking, especially silkscreen printmaking. That was my aim, and that was my idea of community involvement, to get a bunch of people who liked color, who liked activity and so on, and then have all come into the studio and work with me in creating as many posters and prints and so on as possible.
But Lou's not saying that he actually worked from like 7 a.m. till 2 a.m. in the morning. And so he inspired that kind of energy, even though most of us couldn't keep up with him, with everybody. And in between some of the jobs we had that paid bills, everybody would, take that opportunity to do their own print. And sometimes we felt like we didn't have enough time to ever do that. And sometimes it was a little freer to do our own work. But it was sort of, done in between the bigger projects we did with editions of, 50 or 100 for the posters.
And that's something that a lot of artists experience. You set something in motion and then it becomes all-consuming in a very good and powerful and positive way. It is clear that later in the 80s and 90s, you had more time to devote directly to artistic work rather than production work. And there is actually a little sort of explosion in creativity in those decades. For example, the work in your last show at Addison Ripley included 24 recent works created just in the last few years. So I think it's important for this audience to know that the poster work is a component, and then there's also this much broader impact of the other work that you've created. I have another question related to the silkscreen process. So we're all familiar with the long list of different printmaking processes: lithography, etching, woodcut. Some of these are things that can be done privately in one's own studio. So many more of them require a workshop and particular chemicals or techniques and so forth. Silkscreen as an art form was relatively new to the art audience in the 1960s. What was it about the technical process of silkscreen that lent itself so readily to artist collaborations?
Well, it had to do with people's fascination with silkscreen. I can remember that having a half dozen people surrounding my silkscreen table as we made our stencils and as we made our prints and so on. And one of the principal people who was involved in silkscreening happened to be a friend of mine, Lloyd Mcneill, who I believe is no longer with us, but I'm not sure of that. But the whole idea was to have a community of activity, making the silkscreen prints and posters, but essentially just involving people in making art. And that was the whole idea of it.
We have had so many visitors to the gallery who have said they grew up visiting your studio. And so they are not kids anymore. So your decades of influence and starting with having a studio that was open and accessible and right downtown in DuPont Circle made such an impact on so many people. I think for a lot of them, it was their first introduction to fine art processes, and also the first time where they were invited to participate. So often we are simply audience members, but as you're describing it, the workshop, its goals, its ideals are all about engagement and involvement. I want to ask a question about related to Howard. The Howard University Art Department was home to artists such as printmaker James Wells, painter Lois Mailou Jones, and Lila Asher. Can you describe the influence of those artists and the Howard University program in general on your work?
Well, there was hardly any influence on my work because I was always given to very small, almost miniature pieces. But from James Wells, who was my principal mentor, he encouraged me to print outside of my own sort of sensibility, to make things larger, to make things even with more color and so on. He himself was essentially a woodblock printer along with lithography and so on. But I was so fascinated with silkscreen itself, I didn't want to think about anything else except silkscreen prints with all of the bright, wonderful colors that were available.
Thank you. Many of the posters are collaborations with Lloyd Mcneill, who you mentioned, a visual artist and jazz musician who was born in Washington and studied at Morehouse College and then later at Howard University. Can you talk about the process of collaborating with Lloyd?
That would be better answered by Lou Stovall, who is sitting right beside me.
Okay.
Well, they were both at Howard together, and they were very close. They were like brothers. So they both loved each other and had other issues like a sibling would have. But it was an exciting time in Washington, and Lloyd was always a performer. So he loved designing the posters in front of, people at the workshop, when he would, move around and tear the tissue paper and so forth. But it was a great collaboration with the two of them. But Lloyd moved to New York mainly for music in the early 70s.
Okay, thank you.
He did less posters after that.
Yeah, and for the record, I believe he is still living. We got a call from a relative who was planning to visit the show. So he's out there somewhere. And I've had a handful of people have asked about his music and so forth. I have a question for Will Stovall. The workshop has brought art experiences and a sense of unity to generations of Washingtonians, including school children, artists, musicians, and activists, and now has come to represent a significant and very unique archive. What role do you see the workshop collection playing in the years to come?
I love that question. Thank you. Yeah, well, one thing that's very interesting for me is just thinking about what a workshop is. It's described the community that's created in silkscreen printing, that to make a print effectively, you can't really do it by yourself. Actually, I don't even know if it's really even possible in terms of the screen is weighted and needs to be held down in the process of spreading the ink over the screen to make the impression on the paper. So it has to be at least one other person. And then for my dad, there would be at least 2 or 3 in the process of passing the paper, racking the paper, and a big thing for me is the ways in which, with my dad's collection, both the art he made himself, the art he made in collaboration, and the art he collected in the process of these great friendships with other artists, that to explore the values, the community, the life, as a story of DC, as a story of, I guess, collective values that extend even out of the city, and just get at our general spiritual questions. And so a recent upcoming project that will also be a focus in the 2021 exhibits of my dad's work at the Krieger Museum will be more this, away from the political and more into the spiritual, more into the these universal values. And so that's really the big interest of mine, to kind of approach it from different sides and make connections, and tell this as a DC story, and also at the same time pick out the universal insights.
Sure, thank you. Could you also, you mentioned the show at the Krieger Museum, which opens January 2020. Could you talk just a little bit about that show, and also about another project that's coming next year, which is the publication of The Land with Georgetown University Press?
Yes, so we're very excited about both of these things, and the Krieger is really at the heart of this, and what I think will be the beginnings, along with the show, of reintroducing, expanding the view on my dad's work. And the show at the Krieger will feature a survey curated by Daniel Osteen, and it will be a study of, I guess, the Lou Stovall work from the mid-late 60s all the way till today. So it'll be a wonderful overview. And then along with that, which also is the subject of the book. So that will be published by Georgetown University Press. It's called Of the Land, the Art and Poetry of Lou Stovall. And that's these circular prints from 1974 that were made at the same time that DC won its home rule charter, spring 1974, and then November 1974 had the opportunity to vote for mayor for the first time in the 20th century. So it's works of universal celebrations of life at the same time that DC is in this moment of wonderful triumph of self-determination. So it's and the book tells the story of in both these ways of my dad as an artist and his goals, his interests, and how he moves through the city, and how he, by working with a community, comes to find his own voice and express it at the same time that DC is able to achieve its own fight for well, it's still an ongoing fight for home rule, but at least this great first victory.
Thank you.
Excuse me, the dates were wrong on both the book and the Krieger. It's January 2022,
Yeah.
I just
the
put
book
chat.
and the show.
And then is the book February 22?
Yes.
Okay, great. And there was a question in the chat about the Krieger show, and then also how can you purchase the Stovall prints? The posters in our current exhibition, some are available for sale. Others are reserved for the workshop's permanent collection. But if you visit up through July 17th, you'll be able to see those here at Hemphill. I think we can take any questions now, and I'll leave it to Beverly and Nancy to navigate questions if there are any.
I have a question, and I didn't put it in the chat, but, oh, excuse me, before I ask my question, Helen McConnell asked, I would like to find out how to purchase a print, not a poster.
And they can contact me, and I will respond to her, and we'll provide some information.
Okay. Well, my question is actually to Di. You have a wonderful poster in the exhibition about the school children, and I can't remember the exact title of it, but I really was impressed with it. And I'm wondering, from what I read of your biography, you don't necessarily work with prints. And in fact, obviously you have, but is that a continuing thing that you've done? And also the fact that you're a noted master of the miniature, that fascinates me. What does that mean exactly? What kind of work do you do in miniature?
Well, through the 70s, I did do a lot of prints.
Did you?
But I kept wanting more detail. I would drive Luke crazy because instead of just doing a print, I would be, okay, can I print some in this color and then some in this color and then add this? And I realized that I really preferred to work in acrylic to get those kinds of changes in details.
And the work in miniature that you're doing now, what kind of work are you doing now?
So it's acrylic on paper usually, though
Okay.
some on wood,
Uh-huh.
and some is paper collage that I've painted too.
I see. And they're not necessarily freestanding. They're not sculptural.
Actually, in the past, well, until we're redoing our studio, and right before that, I was doing some freestanding, more sculptural
Oh, were you?
pieces out of wood, and which I had painted.
Fan.
I'm anxious to get back to that.
And can you tell me what your training is in terms of art schools that you have attended?
Well, I went to college for 2 years, and then I came up here to go to the Corcoran.
Oh, you did?
I met Lou, and the rest is history.
History. Very good. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, Beverly, I have a question.
Yes.
I wanted to ask actually two questions. One, what do you see to both Lou and Di, do you see as the importance of silkscreen today? And the other question is, I love the idea of your private studio bringing in artists and students and others of the community to really integrate and do work together. But I wonder, is the fate of the private studio something that will continue, or is it more being pressed out by commercial studios and print workshops that work on a far larger and more impersonal basis?
Well, we're going to have our silkscreen studio for handmade silkscreen prints. Pretty much open for involvement with the people from the community who are interested in making art. That's kind of my life's mission, is to let people interact with silkscreen printmaking for as much and as long as they can. And I keep my studio sort of open with my mind and spirit open to people who would like to know more about the possibilities of making art, and making art with silkscreen, because of the wonder of the color, is always like a godsend.
Mhm. And do you see the role of commercial studios as something that is making it harder for private studios like yours to survive?
I'm not sure I really understand that question.
Well, I was talking about big print studios like ULAE or Gemini and things like that, and how are they major competitors to you, or make causing issues for private studios like yours?
Definitely not causing issues. As a matter of fact, people who I have made prints with and who I might possibly make prints with later on, because I'm getting old. I'm 84 years old now, so my energy for making prints is much reduced now than it was, say, when I was in my 30s, 40s, and 50s. So, and I never saw myself as competing with the larger studios, because they were much interested in the phenomena of making art with noted, well-known artists, where I was always more interested in making prints with people who wanted to learn about the medium.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I appreciate that a lot, because that's where I think the effort should be, rather than commercially making money with the big companies. It's nicer to have more of a community intimacy.
Yeah, well, I'm not against making money. As a matter of fact.
I hope not. No, for heaven's sakes, I hope not.
Right. But it is, there's something to say about the wonder of introducing people to the possibility of silkscreen printmaking. It's just such a wonderful thing, and that's how it all started from the very beginning with me. I had an art teacher in high school who taught me to make my very first small print, and I became the poster maker for technical high school in Springfield, Massachusetts. And it followed that, that fascination with working with people and letting them be involved with what I was doing has always been a wonderful fascination.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, we don't have any other, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yep.
Okay, we don't have any other questions in the chat, but I'd like just one more question myself to ask Lou. You have that beautiful print of yours above you, and it's on screen. And I understand that's one of your favorites. Can you tell us when you did that and why it's one of your favorites?
Well, it's about orchids, which is one of my favorite subjects.
Ah.
It was also kind of a test of myself to myself about the subtlety of silkscreen printmaking. And so it has to do more with the whole fascination of silkscreen printmaking as a medium for color than anything else.
It's stunning. It's beautiful.
Well, thank you.
Well, I think that we don't have any more questions, and it goes without saying, this is one, thank you so much for agreeing to do this for the Washington Print Club. We, as I mentioned to Lou and Di earlier, the Washington Print Club was fortunate enough to have an in-person tour of both your house and studio. This was many years ago, but it was a highlight and continues to be a highlight of all of our programs. And here you are again. And we're so happy to have you do this. And thank you, Mary, for your introduction. And I've seen the show in person and I think it's fabulous. I urge you all to go and see it in person, because seeing art in person is much nicer than seeing it on screen. Because I'm sure that print behind you, Lou, looks so much more brilliant in real life. So, and I hope we can go back to in-person tours very soon. We hope to do that in the fall. So,
Well, thank you very much for your interest and all that. The Washington Print Club has always been one of my favorite venues in Washington.
fabulous.
And the work that you all have done in terms of making printmaking available to so many other people. I've tried to reach the entire city, but the Washington Print Club has done that. And I'm grateful to the Washington Print Club for honoring printmaking and for making it available to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. We are obviously partners in a mutual admiration society. Thank you so much.
Good. Good.
So with that, Nancy, may I turn it over to you?
Thank you, Beverly, and thank you to Lou and Di and Will and Mary for such a wonderfully engaging program this morning on so many different levels: art, history, community building. It was really perfect. And thank you to everyone for coming. Please stay posted. Our programs will resume in September, and we look forward to seeing you then. So hope you'll keep in touch via our newsletter, and have a wonderful summer, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Thank you all
Thank
so
you,
much.
Helen. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for hosting it, and thank you for all the great information and for sharing all of this, Mary, Lou, Will, and Di. It was fabulous. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Are we allowed to go now?
Mary, I'm going to see you later.
I'll see you soon. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Mary.